everybody hear me? I'm a pretty loud talker. I have to be with 7 children, right? Amen? So in 2015, I have a 15-year-old daughter. Gave her a smartphone, and we put all these limits and all these monitoring, abilities on it, and we thought we kind of had this figured out, but when we found out that it really didn't matter how much of that stuff, those rules and those restrictions that we put in place, if we did not have character built in to how they were using their phones, it was going to destroy her, and for her it did. She got around all of my rules and all of my restrictions, and she created accounts on social media and met men from around the country, and she ran away when she was 17 years old and was gone for 5 days before someone from the high school came to my house, knocked on my door, and said, I know where your daughter is. You need to go get her because a man from Michigan is coming to pick her up in the morning. So we literally pulled her out of a trailer that was harboring runaway girls, and she's in Bernie, that's where I'm from. And it was a wake-up call. I thought, this is crazy. This is kind of blowing my mind as to what these kids can get into. And so I kind of reevaluated. I've got 6 younger kids, under her. How can I balance this new life on technology in a way that protects them from all these dangers, but prepares them for life, gives them the character that they need so that they're not just mindlessly, numbingly looking at this screen for all of their entertainment, all of their validation, and all of their potential success, right? That was my goal, and I felt like God gave me this whole vision of character, of managing the media, but creating character, using this technology that we have, right, that kids love, but using it to build the character that God desires. And so I started Brave Parenting. That was I thought, I'm just going to start talking about it. I'm just going to research, pour everything I have into this, and make sure that more parents are aware of what's going on and be equipped in that same way so they can do the same thing. So we're going to start today by talking about choices. I talked to the kids from 4th to 8th grade, as Jenny said, and I talked to them a lot about the technology and how they're never going to get away from it, but that the most important thing is relationships in their life and how there's such a balance that is needed. But ultimately, right, kids kind of can't make their own choices. It comes down to the parents. We're the ones who kind of dictate what choices they're going to have as far as technology goes. So when we think about choices, think about yourself and your smartphone, because we can't even start talking about our kids and their technology use until we consider ours, right? So if you consider the choices, it may not feel like you have a choice anymore. Like everything is online. You can't really go without a smartphone, and if you do, you're almost cut off, right? You don't have the ability to do all the things that all the other moms or dads or organizations want you to do, right? You almost can't go without email. I'm impressed for the people who go without social media, who don't have it. That's awesome. But it seems hard. It's a hard thing to resist because it feels like we don't have choices anymore. So think about the elderly man or woman or the grandparent, right? They have a choice whether or not they adapt to this technology. They grew up their entire life without it. They know everything about relationships and hard times and success and all that. They still have a choice. Am I going to join that social media network so I can see my grandkids' picture? Or am I just going to be like, no, I'm not going to do that? The married couples, they have a choice whether or not they continue to engage with one another or they entertain themselves on their phones when they're together. It's a choice. I'm going to put the phone down and we're going to converse over dinner, or I'm going to check my email and continue working even though we're out to dinner together, even though we're supposed to be spending this time together and the TV's on and we're next to one another, we're still going to stare at our own personal screens, right? As parents, we have a choice whether or not we do what we deem important and ignore our children. That's ultimately what it is. It's a choice whether or not we get that phone out, whether or not we do what we think is truly important. Somehow we're convinced, right, that posting that picture on social media is important, or answering that text needs to happen right now, even though our child may be sitting, maybe waiting, but they're watching. But those are all of our choices because we're adults, we have fully formed brains, we can make these choices. And we are also setting the example and the tone for how our kids are going to use their smartphones. Are we taking selfies? Are we posting pictures of our children? By the age of 5, the average child has 3,500 pictures posted of them on the internet.
No.
By age 5. That's our choice. That's not our children's choice. It is our choice. So let's talk about our kids. That baby who loves to look at the phone. That glowing light, whose choice is that? Whose choice is that to give that phone to that baby? That is our choice. That baby is not making the choice. Their brain does not have the capacity to wisely choose whether or not I look at the screen or I don't look at the screen. You send your kid outside to play. If they can bring their tablet outside, guess what? They probably would, right? We choose what the balance is as to the screen time, to the play time, to the relationship time. We choose that. Given free reign, there are very few kids who will not choose the screen. We choose how many hours they spend on the phone, whether or not they get to have it in their room, whether or not they're allowed to have social media, how much time they're going to spend on that. That's ultimately our choice. We also choose what and how long they'll play on video games. How much will video games control their lives, control their entertainment, their social life, all of those sort of developmental stages that they are in during those ages when video games become so popular and so desired. We choose those things. Ultimately, this is what we all need to realize. We, mom, dad, adults, choose. This is not our children's choosing. The world is surrounded by technology. We can't get away from it. We can't. There is no way, unless you completely like go off the grid, buy a ranch, set up smoke signals to communicate with people, right? But that's not practical. That's not the world that we live in. But we have to realize that if we're not willing to choose character for ourselves and balance for ourselves, our children will learn just what we're modeling. They will not learn balance. They will learn that the phone stays in their hands at all times because there's 20 people that we're communicating with, and so we're texting friends from school, we're texting moms in the carpool and this and that, and it never leaves our hands. And that's what our children will do. But whereas we think of this as freedom, this is freedom for parents to be able to get their jobs done, right? We're busy moms, we're busy dads. That's our freedom because now we can do all of this stuff on the go. But ultimately, it really is just convenience. That's all it boils down to. All of this technology is just convenience. We, 10 years ago is all it was. We were all grown adults 10 years ago when the smartphones came out. We survived. Our moms and dads, they survived. We still did all these things. So ultimately, all of this phone brings is convenience, which really, for our kids, embeds itself in this idea of entitlement. Because they feel entitled to the same conveniences as an adult. If I possess a smartphone, I have the same freedom that my parent has. I don't need my parent because all my answers and all my everything is right here in the smartphone. And so they feel entitled to it. But what it really is for our children is bondage. Because they don't know the difference. And their brain is being rewired. Instead of problem solving on their own, their smartphone solves their problems. Instead of dealing with that relationship and that difficulty in a hard way, they just turn to the phone. I'll just forget about that and I'm going to entertain myself with this game. Or the conversation's hard and I'm just going to shoot back something ugly and just end this conversation over text. That's the sort of ways that their brain is being trained. This is difficult. I turn to my screen because my screen feels good. If a child, this is kind of a gross example, but if a child had free access to a liquor cabinet and they knew that when life got hard, I could just go home and I could just, grab a drink and it made me feel better. That's what a lot of adults do, right? They're going to go do that. Well, if they know that the screen is always going to make them feel better and can make them forget their problems of the day, then that's what they're going to do. They're going to always default to the screen. So we're going to go over a few truths that I really want you, because we have to figure out where we are and understand the lies that we've all, I believe that they're lies. Culture is telling us that we have to have these big tech companies. Well, don't get me wrong. I have a smartphone. I use it. You know, I have social media accounts. I kind of use it, right? But ultimately, we're believing this lie that this is the only way that it is, and our kids are going to be rendered useless in life unless they learn this right now at age 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever age they are, right? We've kind of believed this lie. So we're going to go over a couple truths so we can move forward in confidence, knowing what we're doing. And the first truth is tech savvy is not tech mature. Every child is going to be tech savvy. Why? Because they're growing up with it. A touch screen is actually not that hard to use. Go figure. I remember when the smartphone came out in 2007. I had by the time I got my first one, it was probably 2008, and I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I used to think, oh my gosh, my child is so smart. They know how to do it, right? I know you thought the same thing. We all thought our kids were just geniuses because they could navigate this. Well, now we realize you only have to be like 6 months before they start figuring out that this screen is magical, right? But during this time of youth, their brain is undergoing so much growth, so much. And so the savviness is easy, right? And they're learning it in school. They're learning, like I got a tour on Tuesday, the basic, teach of good searching, of what to search for, all of your basics of computer stuff, right? They're being taught that in school. So savviness, that's out the window, right? So I think it's funny when Grandma and Grandpa will say, well, I just need my grandkids to come help me because they know how to do this. And it's true, right? But now, because they've heard this so much, our kids are like, parents know nothing. I am the one who knows how to do it all, right? And so we've all just sort of relied on our kids and their savviness. But unfortunately, it doesn't mean that they are tech mature. They're not going to make the same and right choices that we would do given the opportunity of maybe a hard conversation over text, or a temptation of someone asking for a picture that may be inappropriate. Or I found a back door to get to the internet and do searches on YouTube where my mom and dad aren't going to find out, right? They're not going to make the same choices. That we are not going to look for those back doors because no one's watching us, right? So that maturity is not there. So tech savvy is not tech mature. Let's take a look at the way that kids are using their smartphones just to make sure we really solidify this. The number one way that kids are using the smartphones is playing games. And this isn't hard to imagine why, because when we have toddlers, right, we either hand over our smartphone or we give them a tablet and we say, okay, you can play on this game. What we think to ourselves is going to help them learn their alphabet. It's going to help them read. It's going to teach them something, right? It's going to somehow benefit them educationally, because that is the number one belief that parents believe as to why they allow them to play so many games, is that they're learning through these games. So when they get a smartphone, it's just a natural transition. I played a game on my parents' phone, I played a game on the tablet, this is what I'm going to do on a phone. But the next most common way is social media. It's not calling, texting. That's what's so funny, is that's way down here. Only less than half of the use of that phone is actually for communication, the way that we communicate. So they see social media as their social life, right? That's kind of the new thing. However, we're going to talk a little bit about social media later, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But too much of this screen time playing games and being on social media isn't maturity, right? We know that. We know as adults, if we spend all of this time spending this on gaming and social media, we're not better for it, right? So the next truth is tech consumed is not healthy. This is pretty easy, right? Part of the lie is that they need to know this technology. They won't have any friends if we don't let them have social media accounts, right? Their friends are all going to be on social media, and they're going to be left out and neglected, and no one will like them, and that will be terrible. That will be social suicide for my child if they don't have this. Or they won't be relevant, right? They won't know what's going on in the world or how to navigate it. Well, guess what? If you were to give an 18-year-old who happened to live in a hole right now, if you were to hand an 18-year-old a smartphone right now and say, figure this out, and here's a social media account, figure it out, guess how long it would take them to figure it out? Almost no time at all, right? They would get it. So this whole consumption at that young age, which sadly is now, we're right there, like 7th and 8th grade is now when that whole consumption begins. When I spoke to the students, I shared with them a statistic that 8 and 9-year-olds use 2 hours of screen time a day. But at 13, the average is, at 13 years old, the average is 9 hours a day. So from 8 and 9 at 2 hours to 13, 9 hours. Somewhere, and I'll tell you where that where is, it's that middle school age. We go from 2 hours to 9 hours. Why is that? It's because of the smartphone. Because we are giving them phones, they are putting it in their pocket, and it is their lifeline. No longer is it being controlled by mom and dad, right? I only give the tablet during this time, but the phone is like their personal. They see it as their personal device, and so they can pull it out anytime that they want. And we've gone from this 2 hours to 9 hours, which is not healthy. 64% of children have their own mobile device by the age of 4. Now, whether or not they get to have it all the time, right? Usually not. Typically, it's not until they have the phone that they get to keep it on themselves all the time, but a tablet or a phone on themselves by age of 4. The average age for the first phone is 10, which puts you, right about 5th grade, generally, 5th grade, which is pretty young. This is the average. You gotta remember, this is the average. So there are 8-year-olds getting a phone. I share the statistic, I don't have it in a slide, with their kids, and they were amazed, right? So I said, in their lifetime, in all of our lifetime, right? 6 years ago, in 2012, there were only 23% of kids 12 to 18 who had smartphones. 23% 6 years ago. Of that, the youngest age, like the 11, 12-year-olds, only 8% had phones. Now, in 2018, 6 years later, we're at 95%. 95% across the board. So 6 years. From 2012, when enough iPhone versions were out that we started handing down our old versions to kids, to now, we went from 23% to 95%. And that's in our kids' lifetime. This is when if you have a middle school age kid or an elementary school age kid, this is when they were, toddlers. They were young. And at that time, our middle schoolers were not living on their phones, but now 6 years later, just like that, now they're living on their phones. And I gave you this statistic, 9 hours of screen time a day. So what we have found with the increase of screen time, we've also seen this decrease in health. Since the first smartphone came out in 2007, the suicide rate of children 10 to 14 has doubled. And there's been this idea, this question, okay, what came first? Did more children who had mental health issues, do they go to the phone because that feels good? Or was the phone causing mental health issues, right? What came first, the phone or the mental health issues? Kind of the chicken and the egg question. And so, they've been researching that, and there's now been a study that came out last month for the first time that actually correlated the rates of depression with social media use. In fact, so social media more than 1 hour and 40 minutes a day, which is actually, it's like 10 hours a week, makes you 56% more likely to be unhappy. With your life. Your 27% increased risk of depression, and that is only measured in 8th grade, because that's when children are 13, and that's technically when social media platforms can start collecting data, so that's the legal age to start a social media account. But the average age is 11. So kids are getting their accounts with their parents' permission under the age of 13, but where they can technically start researching and start measuring all this data is 13 years old. And so from 13 up, we see it's really bad at 13 in 8th grade, and then as they get older in high school, it gets less. If you have an older child, you realize that maturity as they hit 16, 17, and 18, it is vastly different than a 12 and 13-year-old. So that leads us into truth number 3. Oh, I'm sorry. I have that up there. Truth number 3 is tech savvy and consumed does not equal success. So we know they're tech savvy. We're watching them and they're totally tech consumed, which means they're not healthy. It's not necessarily going to equal success. To them, they are believing this cultural lie that is what success is. They are watching children their own age become famous on YouTube. And they are holding this to this idealized level that could be me. That was just an average person doing average things and becoming, 10,000 followers, 40,000 views, or whatever this is. When asked in a research study this year, 70% of our kids wanted to either be a professional video game player or a professional YouTube. 70%. If you asked children 6 years ago, it was still, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer or a nurse, or right. But now they see this whole different world and think, well, I could be this, right? No, that's not everyone, right? I know if you don't allow your children to kind of live in that video game and social media world and YouTube world, it is a little bit different. But for the most part, that is what they see. So they see this level of success, and what they've lost is they've lost relationship skills, they've lost coping skills, they've lost problem-solving skills because of these lies. So it is our job as parents to focus on these truths. And I shared with your kids, one of the big things I shared with the kids on Tuesday was this Harvard study done many years ago, started in the 60s. It's the longest longitudinal study on behavioral health that Harvard's ever done. And they asked the question that plagues us all is, what is the key to happiness? What is the key to happiness? And overall, after years of research and years of study, they came up with one conclusive statement: relationships. And one researcher actually said the foundation to happiness is love. And so that's what we really need to focus on when we think about our children's success, is relationships. And primarily, right, it starts with us, and it starts with us at home. I asked the children to think about someone who was not their friend or who was not their peer, about someone who's always on their phone. So I had them close their eyes, think about someone you know, who you love, but they're always on their phone. If they're not texting, if they're not scrolling, if they're not watching something, it's still in their hand, they're always on their phone. And then I asked them, how many of you, when you pictured that person, how many was your parent? 75 plus, I would say 75% or more of the children all raised their hands. That person who was always on their phone, who was neglecting them in their relationship, who was that person that they love, that person they're, in that close relationship with, was their parent. And I know the answer to that question because I ask it every time I speak to kids. And that's my heart. It's because we as parents, we can do a better job. We really can. And that's what I want us all to leave with, is this understanding that we're the role models and that our character is so big. So let's talk about, oh, hold on, I'm sorry. I missed this slide. When we talk about success, these are some headlines that I copied over. Gen Z, which is our generation of children right now, is anxious, distrustful, often downright miserable, a new poll reveals. Generation Z is the loneliest generation, and it's not because of social media. The loneliest of Generation Z reflects not just rising social media use, but a broader decline in interactions, relationships, right, with neighbors, coworkers, and church friends. So they're not lonely because, right, that social media makes them lonely, but they're lonely because they're lacking those actual real relationships. And this one I found was really interesting. Well, adult generations will all say that family is the most important to their sense of self. Gen Z's identity is defined by personal achievement. So whereas we all would say that our relationships, our family, is the most important thing, they are seeing the world in a whole new lens. They see it as, I can be successful. My success, my achievement is all that matters. It's because everything has become personal, because we all have our personal screen. Their friend, who is their friend and they're trying to interact with, is on their personal screen. Doing what? Trying to maintain their own personal achievement. Making sure that their Instagram has this many followers, or maintaining their profile, or checking their YouTube, whatever that stuff is. So we really need to talk about this idea of screen media and character. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about some standards of character, and I have them listed out for you if you want to write down. This is a loose outline of what the book is about that I wrote. This is the standards that we can set for ourselves in our own lives, and then likewise set them for our children. And the first thing we're going to talk about is patience. With patience, it is waiting for the privilege. And that is everything. It's a privilege. We need to view our smartphones as a privilege. To view social media, to check out what's going on with the rest of the world, is a privilege that we should not be doing while we are with our children. We wait for that privilege of when they go to bed, and then we can check and we can do something, or we can post something. That has to be the way that our mind considers it. Otherwise, we will fall into the same trap, and when I should be spending time with you and I should be listening to your stories from school, I'm scrolling, or I'm posting, or I'm checking email, or I'm doing something on my phone. But likewise for our children, it's telling them they really want to play. I use this example of Fortnite. Maybe you have a third grader and you don't want them to play Fortnite, but every 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th up, right, child is playing Fortnite. They can wait for the privilege, right? And that's what it is. I know you really want to play this game, and I know that older brother gets to play this game. One day you will be able to play this game, but right now I need you to practice patience. Because there is very, very little in our world that requires our children to actually practice the virtue of patience. Everything is instant for them. Very rarely do they have to practice patience. So it's setting this standard. I know you really want social media, and I know that you feel like your friends all have it, and therefore you can't possibly find out what's going on and be involved in their lives and all that. But one day you will get it, and you will be a better person by the time that you get it. Your character will be stronger. So right now I need you to practice patience as you wait for the privilege. If they can always pull a screen out whenever they feel impatient, whenever they're bored, they'll never learn this value. The next one is respect. And this is respect for everyone, right? So everyone needs boundaries. I need boundaries to where my phone is not available to me because I have to spread my attention across. I have 6 kids in the house right now, right? So 6. So I turn my phone off I turn screen time on my Apple from 4 to 8. That's my boundary. It's because I've got 4 hours of solid time with my kids that I want to make sure that I'm investing in, that I have to spread across them, right? And I don't want to pull out my phone. And if I do pull out my phone, everything's black and I can't do anything. So then I put it right back, right? And that has been my boundary. Well, kids need boundaries too, right? And so they need to understand that if they're in a conversation with someone and their phone dings, they don't pull it out and just start answering it. But if that's what we do, that's what they're going to learn. But that's what's killing relationships. That phone takes priority, right? No longer, I'm amazed when I see my high schoolers hanging out with their friends and they're all right on their screens. And I'm like, you're hanging out. Why are you still, who is more important in this moment than the people that you are sharing physical space with? But if we don't set that example, if we don't force them into that level of respect. So in my home, right, we have this rule. If you have friends over, show respect. The phone gets put aside. And if you need to go use it, then you walk over and you use it and then you leave it there and then you come back. But this idea of not respecting those who are in physical presence with them, that's what's destroying their relationship. So when we wonder why our children say they're unhappy, they're not getting the full benefit of friendships and relationships because they're constantly being distracted by the phone. Kindness. Every word matters. That's what I told your kids. Every single word matters. But really, the standard that I set, because they're not going to like this if I tell them that on Tuesday, is read what they type, coach what they say. Our children do not know how to digitally communicate. We think because they're tech savvy that they're going to know how to communicate and it's going to be well and good. And here's a smartphone. Go ahead and digitally communicate with all of your friends and live your relationships there. what happens is they don't know how to navigate the hard times. Oh wait, that kind of sounded rude, and I don't know how to respond to that, so I'm gonna say something back rude. And then they can't see facial expressions, and so if you've ever read a child's text that involved like a dispute or an argument, you realize it is so confusing. They don't know how to read each other. At that point, right, we teach them, pick up the phone and talk to that person. But we're not going to know how to help them navigate inside those communication relationships unless we're actually reading what they text when they first get a smartphone. So we can't view this as like, oh, this is their privacy. They're 11, right? They're 12. They don't need that type of privacy. We need to teach them so that they're not ending up bullying someone, because every person who has been bullied and every bully has a parent who has access to their phone to read it and to see what is going on and to coach them into kindness so they can know how to navigate. Hey, when someone says, send me a nude pic, and they don't know what to say, or maybe they say the wrong thing, and you see this, you can say, okay, let's talk about how you're going to respond if this question is ever asked again. Or they're asking you to cheat on homework. How can you respond to this? Should you respond to this? They need to know, and they need to know from us, because if not, they'll just learn from their friends, and their friends are honestly just as bad at communicating digitally as they are. The next standard is for honesty. And this standard is no lies and nothing deleted. Let me tell you, when I talked to the kids and I gave them this character standard, nothing made them squirm more than when I said no lies and do not delete any content. The 7th and 8th graders were like shifting in their seats and they were looking away. And I get it, and I said, hey, I know, I'm a parent, right, of 7 kids. I know that stuff is going to get deleted, and I know that there's going to be lies, but I also know that you're only going to delete the stuff that you know is wrong. And so this is the thing, and so we have a standard, right, in our home. I will find and see anything. That's what you need to know. I may not find and see everything, but they sort of need to have that expectation that I can. And for a lot of stuff, I can. And so we set the standard, no lies. If I'm reading through your text and it says, oh, hey, I was just out shopping and I spent like $300 on this, like, Michael Kors purse, whatever, and I know that did not happen, I'm going to call them out. That never happens. Why are you saying that? But it's so easy for them. It's so easy for them to say these kind of things because they're not going to like come to the house and check, right? And so unless mom or dad was reading the text, right, they're not going to check on that. So, but no lies. And so if I find that, then there's a consequence. But also nothing deleted. So I tell the kids, you're going, no matter what you do, I'm going to find it. So we have a program, it's, I'll talk about it in a minute, that it can find all the deleted texts and all the deleted pictures. And so they know. Now, do I check that on a regular basis? No. When I feel my parental instinct, the Holy Spirit is telling me there is something going on with that child. Their behavior is off right. We as moms and dads, we know there is something not right. And every time I have felt there is something not right, and I have checked their phone, I have found the deleted content, I have found exactly what they have been hiding. And then once you bring it into the light, it's so much easier. You can discuss it. You can problem solve through it. Okay, this happened. Now, let's move forward. How can we learn from this? What happens is they can delete it and they can hide it, and then it all just like stays in this dark place
my mom.
that keeps them in like sin and shame and bondage, right? And it's never dealt with, and it's never, and some of it, let's be real, some of it is really bad. Some of the stuff that they can get into is really bad, and they are holding this all in. And again, we wonder why they're depressed, why they're anxious. Because they have no idea. If they took inappropriate pictures, if those got sent out and then deleted them, so no one knows about it, it could be the internet, at any point in time, those pictures could appear. And they're living in fear and they're living in anxiety. So we set a standard for honesty. So it doesn't matter what you did, leave it there. And if I find it, we'll deal with it. But if I have to find it when it's been deleted, then there's a consequence. So I had a situation where my daughter was asked for inappropriate actions. And so she didn't know, no idea how to respond. She was so clueless. She was in 8th grade and tried to navigate her way through it and barely got through it. It was rough. Well, 2 days later, I was going through the text and I found it. And I came to her and I said, let's talk about this. And she was like, oh, thank God. I have been waiting for you to find it because I have not known what to do. She didn't delete it in fear, but she knew eventually I would see it. But to come, it was kind of hard. They're in that age. Mom, can you help me navigate this question where this, boy is asking something inappropriate of me? That's a little hard, right? A lot of them aren't going to do it. But it's easy for me to say, I found this, let's talk about this. So, nothing deleted. The next character trait we want to talk about is self-control. And this is limited quantity and limited time. Our kids have very little natural self-control, right? So the brain actually does not produce very much self-control, and when you're in addictive behavior, it sort of overrides what little bit of self-control you naturally can produce, right? Which is why addicts will give up all of their relationships, their job, their everything, right, just for that fix, because they don't have any more self-control left. That sort of addiction kind of takes over. So we want to help our children develop self-control because it's like a muscle, and then the more you use it, the stronger that they can get in practicing it. And very little things in life, in the technology world, is going to teach them self-control. So we want to. So limited time. There are many things that you can do to set what kind of time frame your children can actually text and be online. And so we're going to go over that towards the end. So you set time limits. At 9 o'clock, it turns off. One girl raised her hand. I'm not sure who it was, on Tuesday, and said, everything on my phone shuts down at 9 o'clock, and it doesn't come back on until 6 a.m. And I was like, your mom and dad rock. That's awesome, right? But that's kind of what it needs to be. They need to have a specific time. You can also turn it off during the day. Now, I know that here at St. Luke's, they collect all the phones, which is great. My 7 kids have all been in public school, and the high school where my children go, it's a free-for-all. That phone can be out 100% of the time unless they're taking a test. There's no limit, there's no restriction. So I'm going to put that limit and restriction on that. I'm going to teach them self-control by turning their texting ability off during the school hours. Because that's one less thing that they're going to be tempted to do. They're going to be able to practice this level of self-control. And I also limit the amount of text messages. A lot of people don't realize that you can do this. You can actually limit, so when they're young and in middle school, I limit how many they can send. So I'll say to my child, how many text messages do you think that you're going to send in a day? Oh, probably like maybe 100 or so. That was what my kid had answered. Okay, 100. Okay, no problem. So you can get 3,000 text messages. And I set this up, but we have AT&T, but all of them allow you to do it. So we set this up under their smart limits. And so 3,000 texts. Well, guess what? 15 days into it, 3,000 texts are gone. But it doesn't reset until 30 days. And so guess what? They've got to make phone calls. And that's what they would start doing. It's because if they were going to communicate with their friends, well, they had to figure out some way. And so what I saw happening, as I did this kind of as an experiment with 2 of my older kids, and I thought, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like, self-control is just like seeping them from them. So they'd be like, say this to my phone. I'm not responding to that. I'm not wasting a text on that person. Yes, right? Self-control. Otherwise, it'd be like, hey, to every single person who's texting, and then they're not going to turn down a conversation. They're going to, right? They're just going to keep being consumed. And so then, all of a sudden, they would get this text if you have 75% of your text messages left. AT&T would send them, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, I've got 7 days, and only, like this many texts. And so they practice self-control. Because we put a limit on something in this world that is limitless to them. We all remember a time when we had to pay for our texts, right? There was that time. And guess what? We too had that self-control. Because when we paid for it, we limited ourselves. But now it's limitless, so do we limit ourselves? No way. But we know how to exert self-control because we grew up resilient and problem solving, right? We have this sort of thing. So we need to instill these type of things with the technology to help our kids learn this virtue of self-control. The next thing is humility and modesty. Okay, so I'm gonna give you an example. So everybody here, I don't think have we any millennials? Anybody really young? Okay. So this is, for example, picture yourself in high school. And you get your camera. Maybe you still have to attach one of those extra flash things to it. And you put your film in there. And you're gonna like arm's length, you're gonna reach this thing out and you're gonna take a picture of yourself. You have no idea. There's no screen to look, and so you have no idea. You could really only be getting like a quarter of your head. You have no clue, right? But you take a couple pictures, and then you go to Walgreens, and then you develop, and you're like, print me out like 200 copies, and then you get this picture of yourself, and it's okay, it's right, it's fine. But then you go to school, and you're like, hey, here you go, here you go, here you go. Hey, will you tell me I'm pretty? Will you tell me that I'm cute, and that I'm smart, and that I'm valuable? Tell me all this stuff because I need to know. People in our day would have thought we were the craziest, most vain, selfish people on earth. Like, it is crazy, but that has become okay. That level of asking for validation from people, of putting themselves out there, of seeking, self-gratification is now normal. So we need to set a standard for humility. Humility is thinking of yourself less, right? C.S. Lewis says it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. But often that's not what our children are doing. Remember, they define themselves by personal achievement. Not relationships, not family, personal achievement. So this camera always being on themselves is not promoting a virtue of humility. So we need to set a standard. So I set the standard for my children of no selfies. Plain and simple. I think that a picture with friends, where there's multiple people in the group, I call that a groupie. Because you're in relationship. You're tangibly sad. Maybe you want to share a memory. Maybe it's whatever. Or it's a picture of yourself, but maybe you're on vacation and like the Statue of Liberty is behind you, right? That's a little bit different than posing with this picture, making the duck face, sticking your tongue out, doing all of this sort of stuff is very, very different type of selfie. And so the standard is just none. And if I find it in your camera roll, I turn the camera off. Because you can. And we can choose that. They're not going to choose it because the world tells them, make much of yourself. We wonder when they're not good enough, when they don't feel like the world is telling them that they are enough, or they're pretty enough, or they're good enough, why they feel unhappy and why they feel anxious. They're focused on themselves instead of the world around them, instead of the relationships. And for modesty, to set a standard for no multimedia messaging, especially for under high school. And that means no sending, receiving of pictures. That is also a feature that you can turn off. Our children, sexting is like so rampant. I have spoke to probably 100 schools this year. And the administration say that it is the #1 problem, that they are constantly dealing with it. And it goes hand in hand with bullying. Because the pictures get out there, and then there's bullying, and then there's shaming, and then there's, but if we were to narrow it down as to what is what's happening, is this idea of sending and receiving inappropriate pictures between adolescents. And it's happening younger and younger and younger. So turn off that ability until they can make the choice themselves, which really is probably like junior or senior year of high school, ultimately, right? We need to stop them from even having that, because if they're asked for a picture and they can't send it, they're not even gonna think. They're gonna move right along and be like, sorry, mom and dad turned that feature off, can't do that. Right, that's gonna be their default answer. They won't have to think, oh, but this boy says he loves me. Maybe he really does, and if I don't do it, but they don't have to think. That problem solving is gone. Like, they don't have to. Mom and dad turns it off. It's done. And then the next thing is self-worth. And that is delayed access to social media. Based on all of the research that they studied starting in 8th grade for social media, where the levels of depression, unhappiness, and loneliness and anxiety start to drop off is 16. So my standard that I hold to every presentation and my own children is age 16 for social media. Anything less almost doubles their risk of depression, doubles their risk for anxiety, loneliness, and unhappiness. And that's hard because I had one sweet girl come up to me after on Tuesday when I spoke and said, "Do you think social media is bad?" And I said, "For children, yes." She said, "Because my parents won't let me have it, and all my friends have it, and I'm left out of everything. And I know this. My girls wanted social media. I didn't think I was going to survive it. I thought this is going to be the death of our relationship, is me saying no to social media." And when my oldest turned 16, my second oldest really, guess what? She didn't want it. Because she saw all the drama and all the fights and all of the bad decisions and inappropriate and the bullying. She just saw it from the outside. And then she would stand back, and then her friends would call her on the phone and be like, "You're the only person I can trust. Will you help me? Will you talk to me?" And it didn't matter that she wasn't on there, because over time, people saw her as the valued, trusted friend, because she was not going to go on social media and say anything about them. And she didn't know all the other drama that was going on because she wasn't present there. She turns 17 next week, and she just got her first social media account, and she chose Facebook. Because she babysits and nannies, she does homeschool online, and she said, "I need to be where the moms are so that I can say, hey, I'm free to babysit." I know. But I was like, that is the reason why we want to be on social media, is to connect with the people for a purpose. That's ideally what we, I want to connect with my family, maybe who's across the country. That's my purpose, right? But they often, as young adolescents, want to get on there just to hide their conversations and to be in this private space away from their parents. That's what they consider their private space. Give them private space. Let them go into the bedroom without phones and close the door. Like, that can be, it's very, their mindset is just completely different. And so I was really impressed with my daughter. I thought for sure it was just gonna, like I said, it was gonna end our relationship. But now she says thank you, because now none of my friends know how to communicate. They're in these relationships, like romantic relationships, and they're terrible and they fall apart, and they're living their lives, like on social media. And she has a boyfriend, and the boyfriend, as soon as they start dating, deleted his Instagram account and said, if you aren't gonna have it, then I don't want it either. And so they don't, and so these different things I see, the fruit. And my son, the same thing. 16, no desire for it. So, it's hard. It's hard to wait until 16. But this is when we're trusting them to drive cars. This is when we are trusting them to hold jobs in society. There is a much different maturity level between 16 and 13. It is huge. And it's so huge that it can save their mental health, can save their relationships if we delay access to social media. Okay, so on the back of the page, I did handwrite all these out, so you don't have to take a picture and write all these down. This is some of your toolkits. I have access to tutorials and articles on braveparenting.net to kind of walk you through all of these, so I'm not going to go in depth, but utilize built-in parental controls. Your smartphone, any smartphone that you have or your children has, it would be iPad, Android, you name it, PC, Mac, computers, there are parental controls built in, and they are fantastic. You can limit, a lot of people don't know, your home computer, you can limit time under your child's account. You can literally limit the content. You can turn off the internet. There's lots of things that are built into them. Apple and Mac are by far the best for built-in parental controls. Limit through your cellular service provider. That's like what I was talking about, the AT&T smart limits. Actually, they don't call it smart limits now. They just changed it. But Verizon, they all have, it's like $5 a month. And it's probably the best $5 that I spend every month, is to have these extra parental controls. I can limit their data so they're not running up my, data, taking all my data so that when I need it, right, I don't have any because they're using it all. Those are great services. You can also control your home Wi-Fi with Circle. One sweet girl said, and when I spoke on Tuesday, My parents have this like weird cube thing called Circle, and that's exactly what this is. And you hook it up to your home, to your router, and everything goes through the router and then to Circle. So it basically controls what type of internet is going to each device. So Circle recognizes everything that connects to the internet, and then you can say, okay, this iPad, well, okay, that's Adam's iPad, and so he can do these certain things because he's this age and he can have this much time, and then that's how much it's limited on. And then you can say, well, you know, Kelly's iPhone, she can only have 30 minutes on Facebook. And so that's what I do. I put a limit of myself onto social media because when I'm at home, I don't want to lose an hour of my precious time because I got stuck in a scroll that I didn't stop, right? And so we can limit that. We can limit for our kids, and if they do have social media, you can limit them, how much they are going to look. Maybe on Instagram if they're allowing that as they're teenagers. While they're at home, you can put limits on all of that. Also, you can monitor home computer use. There are several different free options, and I don't like the names because obviously they have the word spy in it, which sounds like you're spying, but we just call this like, it's like your truth serum. It's kind of what it is. Spyrix, KidLogger, SpyTech, Elite Keylogger. So what it is, so you can put these and they run in the background of your home computer. And then if you suspect that maybe your child wasn't doing the right thing on the computer, or there's something going on, right, behavior changes, you can go in and you can take a look, and it logs screenshots every 3 seconds. It logs everything that's logged in. So I'll give you a practical example. We didn't turn the internet off at night or anything, right? We just, whatever, we all went to bed. Well, one Sunday, all of a sudden I see 3 of my adolescent/teen boys asleep on the floor in the middle of the afternoon. And that never happens. I do not have nap takers, not whatsoever. And I was like, what on earth? Why are they asleep? And immediately I was like, oh man, they were probably up. I guarantee you. So I told my husband, go check that computer. And sure enough, these crazy boys set their alarms for 1 a.m., got up and played, this was years ago, played Minecraft until like 3 a.m. and then went back to bed. But the next day they were so tired that, so I went ahead and looked ahead of time before I approached them so that I kind of already knew the truth. And so I was able to say, so what'd you do last night? And at that point they knew, because we tell them, we're going to know anything that you're doing on this computer. But the thing is, they don't have that self-control. They think they're super savvy, but they're not mature, right? And so they go and they do these things. So we can know. Now when we suspected that one of our children was maybe looking at inappropriate content, right? They say they're working on a history paper. 3 hours later, there is 0 history paper. There's like a sentence, like a title, at the top of the page. We can look at it. We can see what's going on. And then we know how to approach that conversation. We already know. We don't have to try and pry it out. We can understand, hey, I know that this is what you've been searching. And so let's talk about this, right? Because they don't need us to get angry and put on more rules about them. They just need a way to openly communicate in relationship with us about the hard things that they don't know how to deal with. And then also you can retrieve deleted content. We use the product called Dr. Phone, and it is a software that you purchase. It's about the recovery service for like text messages and pictures. It's like $50, and then you have it. It's a one-time thing, and then you just plug your phone in, and then you can choose what do you want to download. Do you want to download contacts, text messages, pictures? And then that comes up, and you can read it. All of your deleted content shows up in orange. I will tell you, it's not like very clear, like this message from Kelly and this message from someone. But you can read the orange ones, and it doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter who it's from. I just read the deleted stuff, and then I say, okay, is there an issue that I need to know about? Right? Because you can tell right away. What's the pictures that are being deleted? And you know right away kind of what's going on. So again, I don't use that very often, but when I do, it's very handy. And there's also third-party monitoring apps, such as Our Pact, Bark, TeenSafe. So these are programs or services that are going to read all of the content on your child's phone and then send you alerts and allow you to put limits and allow you to do all this stuff. Now, I'll be honest, I don't recommend them. They are okay if that's the easiest thing for you because you're a busy parent and there is no possible way that you can monitor their phone otherwise. But this service has access to all of your child's content. So that's one more company that has all of your child's data. And these companies have leaked information. Their servers have been hacked. TeenSafe was just hacked at the beginning of the year, opening their servers of all the information, to whoever, how long, for like 12 hours, I think it was. So in that regard, I say that the best thing that you can do is use the built-in parental controls on the device itself. If they have a cell phone, use the cellular service provider, control your Wi-Fi, know what's going on inside your home. And then again, your computers know, and then you gotta trust your parenting instinct to know when something's going on. Ultimately though, the best thing that that we can do excuse me, is to role model. This is the best thing that we can do, is to put down our own phones and to be the better example. We want to be the person that we want our children to be, not on the phone. And we have to show them, and that's hard. That's why I call it brave parenting, because you have to make this brave choice, because not very many people around us are doing it. And so when you're at the grocery store and everybody else is standing in line, looking at their phone, or you're somewhere, you're waiting, and everybody, all of a sudden you look around and everybody's on their phone, and you're kind of like, I would love to start a conversation with you, or I would love, but everybody's looking down. But we have to be the change. It starts with us. For you, as you go home, this isn't written down, but if you want to take these, put them in your bank here. 5 solutions for healthier smartphone use for us and for your children. Delete your social media apps from your phone. If they are what is consuming your own time, delete them. Truly, like, make that brave choice. If you just can't stop, if you don't have the self-control, delete them. Second thing is use an actual alarm clock. This is amazing. Walmart sells them like $4, and it could be the best $4 you spend. Statistics show that over 70% of adults, the very first thing that they do is open their phone and look for texts, look for emails, and look at social media. That's how that's what you're setting your day on. You're not setting your day on your own, like, personal reflection, personal goals, or anything, or even like what you got to go get done. And we can get caught up in that, and then we wonder why we're late, why we're anxious, why we're frustrated. So get a real alarm clock, set the phone somewhere else. Rarely will a catastrophe happen that you won't have that by your bed. Disable notifications. If you have an Apple phone and you have set up the new screen time on that new iOS 12, it tells you how many notifications you get per day, right? And so if you're like 500, really, but you could be over 100, and you're like, that's how many times that phone is distracting you. That's how many vibrations, how many buzzes, pings, dings, rings, you name it, that is coming into your phone that is distracting you and your focus. So look at those notifications, even if you don't have the Apple screen time, but think about it. What do I not need to contact me? Do I not need, the music app to tell me what new music is coming? Great, turn off that notification. Do I not need whatever, like the weather, or some inspirational quote, or this app or that app? They all want to notify you, because they want your attention. They are fighting for your attention. Turn them off. Don't give them your time, right? Turn those off so that you can actually be more present. You can also turn off your biometrics. Kind of makes it harder to lock. So the new phones, right, you can just look at it, it reads your face, and then it opens up, or it's got your thumbprint. Turn those off and leave it to where you have to type in your 6-digit number in order to unlock it. Why? Because it makes it that much harder. If you can just pick the phone up, and as you pick it up, your thumbprint goes there, and there it is, and I can just go to town, right? It's that much easier. So make it just a little bit harder, because as you're typing that 6-digit password, you wouldn't think those 2 seconds make a difference, but you can consciously think, do I need to be doing this? Also, use, like I just said, the iOS screen time. Android, the newest Android has the well-being app, where they are also giving you the options of turning on mental health, benefits. So if you put your phone upside down on the table, it will not notify you. It will not send notifications. Where if you put it up this way, it will continue to do that. So Apple and Android are jumping on board, because they're getting so much pressure from all these other organizations saying, hey, you're creating this technology, and now we've got a bunch of addicts. So what are you going to do about it? Because they're all our kids, and this is not okay, right? So this is good. These are great new steps. There's also apps like Moment. So you install the app on there, and then you can set time limits and app limits through that app, and then at the end of the day, it will tell you how much time you spent on it, how much time you spent on each app. that's really the most humbling thing I think that has come now that we have these monitoring services for ourselves, is that when you can see how much time you have spent on the phone. One of the teachers had said that he spends like 5 hours. You know, when I gave the statistic, he's like, wow, that was me. You know, I look at my screen time that Apple tells me how many hours, and it's like 5 hours, right, which is a lot. I can look at my teenagers. So I currently have three that have a phone, and so me and those three will all kind of look and compare our screen time at the end of the week, and we'll see who has the least amount of screen time and who has the most. It's just because we want, I've made it so that we are most important, your friends are most important, so let's talk about it. Like, why was it so high? Why were you at, you know, but honestly, they're keeping it at like 2.5, 3 hours at the most a day. Sometimes there's less than an hour a day on the screen, right? Which I think is fantastic, because my average is usually about an hour and a half a day. So use those because they are really fantastic. And then finally, you choose. Remember that you have to choose how this is going to go. Allowing, if you're going to allow it, you need to monitor it. Plain and simple. Allowing equals monitoring. If you're going to monitor it, that means you need to mentor through it. You need to be the mentor. It's not just about rules. It's about setting the standards and then walking with your kids through these standards and helping them grow in character. But ultimately, the mentoring equals modeling. You have got to model it. Your kids will not own it and will not take it on themselves unless they see it modeled from you, the parent. So how can you be brave? I had your kids repeat to me some core things, and the one thing that I wanted to instill in their hearts so much was relationships are greater than screens. And if I can have you guys go home with that one statement as well, relationships are greater than screens. Our relationships with our kids are far better, far greater worth than anything we can do on our screens. If we can remember that, we have one a day. Yes, sir.
I'm interested in your perspective on how important it is or practical it is to align your own house rules with the house rules of your friends, your kids' friends.
Yes. Right, yeah, so definitely. It's kind of funny because my kids' friends will be like, yeah, so I know that you talk to my mom because now I've got the same rules. And so it's true, and so I do. I'm very open. And I'll say, you know, if I don't know this parent, I'll say, okay, so you're going to have, you know, my son over. So what kind of technology rules do you have? Because, you know, I don't want my kid coming over here and playing 3 hours of video games, you know, and then coming home and telling me they didn't have any screen time, you know, that type of thing. And so like, oh, I'm so glad that you asked. That's the thing. I think we're scared to ask those type of questions. But there has been so much openness and like, yes, let's actually get on the same page with that. And so, but you have to have the bravery to just start that conversation. And making sure that you know before your children are over there and who they're interacting with. But there are some parents who completely disagree, and it's just easier, plain and simple, right? It's just easier to just let them have the screen. They kind of have their own life going on, and I'm just going to give my kid the screen, and they'll be fine. I mean, I've literally heard that from some parents. They'll be fine. You know, I can do whatever. But then when they come in my house, I'm like, that's great, but in my house, you're going to put your phone up, you know, you can't have it in the bedroom at night. You know, we set all these sort of standards. And you know, in the end, you know, you can't influence, right, all of them, but I have found that by open conversation, that it has been a real benefit, and you've seen a lot of fruit where parents have been more open to say, okay, let's discuss how our group of kids, because they're all friends, you know, when are we all going to get them a phone, and how are we all going to navigate this idea of social media?
Do you include television time in your screen time hours?
We do.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to monitor or restrict YouTube, right?
That's the most
My kids
common.
don't even watch TV, but they could watch YouTube for
Lifetime. Right. So you can limit YouTube through Circle, because that obviously YouTube is connected to the internet. So if you put a limit through Circle, it's going to limit how much of YouTube actually goes to the devices.
Okay.
So you get close to this.
You can do that too. You could also turn off YouTube through Circle. All right. Thank you all so much. I will be back here. Thank you.